Welcome. We're here with Olivier, who went on the Chile Public Health program. Welcome, Olivier.
Thank you.
So tell us about your experience.
Well, I studied abroad with SIT Chile Public Health, Traditional Medicine, and Community Empowerment this past fall semester, 2015. And overall, it was a really, really, really wonderful experience. It was a dope experience. I don't regret it for a minute. I know I'm a pre-med student. I'm a chemistry major, and I have a couple minors as well, concentrations. So particularly for pre-med students, for science majors, there's not really much of a culture for studying abroad. You don't really think about it as much because you're stuck with like labs and a lot of research types of options that you kind of consider pursuing instead rather than studying abroad. But it's something that I knew had to be done, especially because I'm a science major, especially because I'm pre-med. And a friend of mine studied in Chile 2 years ago, and she told me about it. And so I looked into a couple programs, found SIT Chile, knew it was the right program for me, and I haven't looked back ever since. My favorite parts of the program, the weather, beautiful weather all the time, except when we were in Temuco, it rained every day, but overall, it's better than blistering cold, which is what I'm getting right now in the Berkshires of Massachusetts at school. My host family experience, I had, I think, the most unique host family in terms of family structure. It was my host mother, her brother, and her nephew, but I refer to him as my brother rather than my cousin. We were wonderful. We got off to a great start. They really, really did their best to make me feel at home, and they supported me no matter what I was doing, and always reached out to me and wanted to help out when it came to like my ISP, homework assignments, contacts, resources I needed to find. And because I had gotten so close to them leading up to my ISP or leading up to the end of October, they were part of the reason why I decided to stay in Arica for my ISP, in addition to the fact that it would better serve my ISP project. Another huge, I'd say, upside or just benefit to this program is the fact that just the nature of it, the kinds of things you learn, the Chilean healthcare system, but specifically the practices and like special needs of Mapuche and Aymara people, that's not the kind of stuff you can get in a classroom, not even in Chile. It's not the kind of stuff you'll find at Oxford or anywhere else. You have to be in this specific location to learn something this nuanced and this specialized and this important, esoteric even. More so, SIT is the kind of program where you need to be the kind of student who is willing to define your own experiences for you. We're with the American cohort for a large amount of time, so we don't really it's not like direct enrollment, so you're not like taking classes with other Chilean students, but you really have to, it's really about initiative, defining it how you want. If you feel like there's something the program is lacking or something that you wish you had gotten to do or want to do, then as long as it's not forbidden in the rule books, you should do it, find a way to do it. Another upside was the ISP period. I loved the ISP period. It was wonderful. I love I'm a very independent person. I like handling things on my own or figuring out how to do this and that and how to get what I want and need. So ISP period was wonderful. My ISP topic was, it was an interesting one. The title was English, characterization of health problems, application of preventative practices, and health-seeking behaviors of people of African descent between urban Arica and rural Asapa Valley. And I chose that topic. Earlier I mentioned I'm a chemistry major with a couple concentrations. I'm a chemistry major and an Africana Studies concentrator with a Spanish certificate. So with a concentration basically at Williams is essentially a major, but we just call them concentrations. So with Africana Studies, what it does is it looks to explore the African diaspora throughout the entire world, socially, politically, economically, et cetera, et cetera. So I was pretty interested coming, to a foreign country, looking at Chile. What did the African diaspora in Chile, what did it look like? After doing some research. It wasn't easy at all by a long shot. I had decided that learning that Arica was a principal site for people of Chileans of African descent. Um, that was the major reason why I needed to stay in Arica, not just because of my host family, but it was the ideal site for my project. So that was an interesting experience navigating that kind of dynamic, because I think Chile doesn't have the same kind of dynamic with its African diaspora that I expected that you find in like Mexico or Brazil. It's much more unique, I believe. And that uniqueness made it hard many times, but it also made the experience equally rewarding. And on the topic of ISP again, it was something coming in like orientation first week. ISP is like really the one thing everyone's thinking about. It's like ISP, we got to do like this big research project. Apparently, like, what do we have to do? Do we have to know what we want to do now? Like, do you know what you want to do now? That there's kind of like this subtle scramble that everyone kind of has in their head that they don't really. It's kind of like all you're thinking about during orientation, aside from the fact that you're in a country. It's like, when is he going to start talking to us about what we have to do here? I knew that I wanted to make something concrete out of that ISP. I'm studying abroad, but I'm not here to be on vacation. I chose ISP for a reason. I chose SIT for a reason because of the ISP component. I wanted to make it something concrete, something I could bring back to my school to continue working on, to continue digging into the African diaspora in Latin America, whether it be in a public health perspective context or not. It was something that wasn't just a side project. It was something that had potentiality, that had possibilities, and that could allow me to investigate further topics.
Great. And um, what about the language part? Was it difficult for you speaking Spanish?
So I had come in previous to SIT. I had taken about three semesters of Spanish. I tested out of introduction. I started at intermediate, then some intermediate of intermediate, then advanced composition. And I was pretty confident in my Spanish. Just like I knew like and then I hadn't taken Spanish a semester. Well, rather, the last time I took Spanish was sophomore fall, so it had been a full year since I had taken Spanish, and practiced it regularly. But I still came in pretty confident. I come from a household that speaks more than one language, and I grew up speaking more than just English. So languages were pretty easy. Chilean Spanish, whew, that was it. It was a challenge. It was a challenge. I found it harder than Dominican Spanish or Puerto Rican Spanish, and a lot faster. A lot of Chilenismos everywhere. Oh my God. It was either I'd have to stop a conversation to ask or just figure it out by context. That was a challenge in and of itself, but as time went on, I realized that I was better able to understand, or rather, I was better able to pick back up where the person was speaking, where I had fallen off because I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I feel as though I didn't feel the effects of how much my Spanish improved significantly at the end of the program, but I definitely, looking back on it now that I'm back in the country, you start processing this whole experience. And I feel like my Spanish has improved dramatically. I mean, I'd like to imagine it was pretty good before I even got there, but dramatically, like a lot of my friends who are Spanish as their first language, they tell me that I sound like an actual Spanish speaker now, that I don't really have that much of an American accent on me when I speak. I'm like, oh, I didn't know I had an American accent, but thank you. I speak comfortably, I speak confidently. Yeah, it's a pretty good feeling. And I think for a lot of students, you probably feel it most when you come back.
Mm-hmm. And how did the culture feel? Do you feel like people were Was there a lot of people of color, or is it a pretty homogenous city?
The group or the city?
The city, Arica.
Arica, for the most part, I'd like to say it was not entirely homogenous, but so Arica is like, as I said, like the principal site for a lot of, it was a principal site in early colonialism for the receiving of African slaves from like Congo and Angola, and other countries, Sierra Leone. But you know, it also received a lot of other immigrants as well, Colombians, Peruvians, Chinese immigrants as well. Not not I wouldn't say perhaps phenotypically homogenous, but culturally no. There are it's right on the it's very close to Peru, Colombia, Bolivia. There's a lot of kind of international traffic. There are a lot of Colombians. You see Colombians down in the commercial center. You see some Peruvians, especially in the agro. You see people coming particularly for work. So you see a lot of interchange in cultures and experiences. And that was actually one of the exercises we did while we were in SIT, well, while I was away. And we were in places like the agro and the commercial center, finding people and listening to their stories and talking to them about how things work. And we ended up figuring out that, hey, some people were Colombian, some people were Peruvian. This woman was Aymara, she comes from Putre, that kind of thing. So I would say, as an American looking in, it would seem that it's pretty homogenous just because when asked that question or when thinking about that, you'd probably look for racial features first. But I would say that it's not.
Mm-hmm. Great. And did you like the people of Arica? Did you feel like it was a comfortable city?
Oh yeah, I like that, Ika. It was, I will say that when finalizing my ISP topic and decision and figuring out the ideal location for it, I did struggle a little bit just because I wasn't sure if I wanted to be in Arica for another month again. Not that I hated Arica, it's just that we'd been there for so long. The idea of being somewhere else was tempting. It was tantalizing. That just made sense. We'd been in one area for so long. It felt like it would make more sense just to be in another area in the country to do work. But I did love it enough to stay one more month.
Great.
Yeah.
And what do you think makes SIT unique?
Similarly to what I said, the nature of the material that we learn is not the kind of thing you can get in a classroom or in any ordinary classroom. The independence that you get to actually be able to create something if you have the initiative and the desire to do so. One of the reasons why I was actually talking to a friend of mine last night about SIT and my study abroad experiences because he's interested in studying abroad with SIT, but he just doesn't know where yet. And he told me if I could give SIT a grade, what would I give it? And I said I'd probably give it an A minus, only because, well, the minus comes from as opposed to an A. Part of what kind of the culture of the American cohort actually is why I give it an A minus. Diversity was one issue. The group, like just looking back at the classes, like when we'd go to Casa Seat at the headquarters in Arica, like you see like no more than 7 students of color at a time. And that has an effect. That will affect experiences of students of color abroad, especially considering that we're with this American group for so long. On top of that, going back to the ISP, I was a little disappointed because it took me a while to adapt to the group dynamic and I still didn't adapt. I was kind of doing my own thing for a good amount of time. Because I had found that not a lot, but a considerable number of other students, other classmates of mine, fellow Americans, weren't looking to make the kind of ISP I was looking to make. And if I couldn't really connect with you on an academic or intellectual basis when talking about ideas, then I don't really want to connect with you at all. So that That is probably made perhaps arguably one of the only downsides with SITs, just the degree to which we are with this little cohort for such an extensive amount of time. But at the same time, I think SIT is the kind of program where you have to dare to be greater than a group identity, a homogenous group identity, especially a foreign identity out in a different land where there's so many things to explore. You need to go there and be there understanding that you're looking for what you need and you're looking to develop your own experiences, and that you can't let other factors impact the reason why you're there if you're there to actually create something concrete. So I think SIT is really about really for those who can perceive it, developing a sense of initiative and creating something for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Great. Excellent. And what would you tell, is there anything extra you would tell students that are thinking about the program? I think you've covered everything, but.
I'd say don't freak out about money that much. Transportation was pretty cheap. Host families, they cover you from breakfast, lunch, and dinner, snack time, whatever. Excuse me. Money, I'd like to say I spent somewhere beneath $300 the entire trip. I wasn't really, and really it all went to buying extra food just because I worked out a lot while I was away. Buying extra food and then buying gifts for my family and friends. It really wasn't, and like toiletries, it really wasn't anything extreme. I don't think people need to be bringing wads of cash or feel like they need to, or feel pressured into making sure you have money at every single turn. Your host families are wonderful sources. They will support you, especially if you're willing to create that kind of dynamic between them and actually want to be a part of the family. That they'll have your back. My family had my back. We're wonderful. Shout out to the Silva family. They're great. What else? Yeah, no pressure on money, especially considering SIT pays for our dinners and gives us little mini food stipends when we go out on excursions, when we're in Temuco, so on and so forth. And
Anything you wish you knew before you went?
I didn't know how close or how much interaction we'd have with the rest of the Americans in the program, but I learned anyway. It wasn't a big deal. I can't really. I don't think so. Not that I could think of, no.
Okay. Well, it sounds like overall you had a great time. So.
Yeah, very great time. Very great time.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
This is excellent. Thank you.